Hi. So this is my verisimilitude board. I'm gonna run through it really quickly and hopefully I enlarge some of the images postscript. Hopefully I do figure out how to do that, but if I don't, um, I'm deeply sorry for that. All right, so here we're gonna start with my little cat guy here. He um is a instance of verisimilitude because he symbolizes Dick, the character, and because the moment in which this is in reference to in the quote here is speaking about when it's focusing in on Dick and Perry in on the diner after they murder the Clutters. And so it references him to as one narrow-faced and one with a blue cat tattooed on his right hand, which can be connected to our next verisimilitude point, which would be Perry and birds. And so the quote reads, slaughtered birds, crows, chickadees, sparrows, foolhardily enough to have flown into the path of the oncoming motorists, using their paws as though they are surgical instruments. The cats extract from the grills every feathery particle. And this is a point of verisimilitude because Capote has a very strong relationship with Perry after the events of In Cold Blood. And so this is a point of solace for Capote where he's essentially implying that Perry's future was robbed by Dick, and this can be seen by the lives of the birds being stolen by the cat, which would be Dick in this scenario. Our next point of verisimilitude would be Capote's insertion of himself into the character or persona in Cold Blood of Alvin Dewey, in which case he's Alvin Dewey is visiting the graveyard and happens upon the Clutter's family grave, which is a moment of solace. But the likelihood of Alvin Dewey returning to this grave is very low, and therefore it's an insertion by Capote for emotional completion for the reader to get a satisfactory ending out of the narrative, which can take us to the one that y'all can probably actually see, which is in reference to the eye motifs that are littered throughout the book. I'm going to read it out really quickly. He had, it could not have amazed him more than what he did in fact discern, a hand holding back a curtain and eyes. But as he subsequently described it, the sun was hitting that side of the house. It made the window glass waver, shimmering, twisted, and what hung beyond it. This is a quote or quotation from In Cold Blood that Perry supposedly said, but since this is a point of verisimilitude, I'm hesitant of calling it a quote. This is supposedly Perry coming to grips with the reality that is slowly encroaching as their little crusade in Mexico is coming to an end, and they return to the United States, only to find out that they will become prime suspects in the investigation, which makes it a point of very similitude because Capote knows that this is happening, but he includes this seemingly meaningless detail for the reader for context, which adds a level of foreshadowing to the event. And then we have the boot. This, as we can see here, is related back to the cat, which would be, Dick. And this is in reference to the point where Alvin Dewey is observing the photographs of the crime scene and sees that there are two, not one, not three, but two pairs of boot prints, and one having that iconic kind of cat paw feature, which is at this point the verisimilitude kind of element hadn't been established that Dick would be the symbolic persona of the cat, the killer, but this is obviously just related because no one wears cat paw boots, and this is meant to build suspense because it adds a level of evidence to the investigation, which builds intrigue within the reader, keeps people coming back when you're releasing your investigation in parts. And then we have that one. Ooh, I like this one. Okay, so this one is in reference to the symbolic nature of the position of celestial bodies, like albeit like the moon or the sun, celestial bodies. And the quote reads out, this is from Bobby giving testimony when he's getting interrogated by Alvin Dewey. And he says, then she ran back into the house and I drove away. It was clear as day. The moon was so bright and cold and kind of windy, a tumbleweed blowing about, but that's all I saw. Only now, when I think back, I think somebody might have been hiding there, maybe down among the trees, somebody just waiting for me to leave. And this is a point of suspense building. This obviously could have been something from Bobby's testimonial, but the inclusion of the environment in the form of like the tumbleweed and the moon adds this ominous element, which we as the reader appreciate because it builds suspense. But other than that, the likelihood of Bobby giving something like that in his testimonial is low, but it adds narrative points. Right, our next point would be Mert and the rumor mill. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a rumor mill. And Capote utilizes Mert as the quote-unquote rumor mill to facilitate a lot of the action, or not action, but the conflict, or well, rather establish context for conflict between townspeople, in which case this quote relates to the rumor that, or not the rumor, but the acceptance of Dick and Perry being the culprits of the Clutter murders. And so, yeah, it establishes the conflict where this is as much of a culture shock for the town, but as we have multiple instances of foreshadowing, it's the culmination to see the effect of what we know has transpired. Yeah. Our next point would be, I'm gonna save that one for last. This one, we'll go here. So this is in reference to the landscape of, I think my phone just did a little notification there. The landscape of Nancy Clutter's bedroom, where this would be a very similitude point of morbid, unnecessary diction, where Capote goes into great detail about the paint being like pink, splattered-esque, and the teddy bear being one in a shooting gallery. And this is obviously a point of foreshadowing, because at this point we don't know that that she gets killed in her bedroom. And so it establishes foreshadows both where she's going to die in the form of her room becoming the shooting gallery, because the pink covered walls, it's blood. And then here we have Capote has an aspect of verisimilitude of empathizing with Perry, which we know because of his very strong relationship over the course of creating the narrative. In which case, during Perry's interrogation by the larger investigators, the investigator brings up that today was Nancy's birthday, in which Perry begins to feel a longing sense of regret, which would be uncharacteristic for a killer, especially with the brutality in which the crimes were committed. And so that further emphasizes the point of Capote attempting to humanize Perry despite being a killer, where he's like, I regret this because that person had a birthday and today might have been it. And then we have the big score, which interestingly enough only shows up twice, but it's an aspect of verisimilitude because it establishes a reasonable motive for Dick and Perry, in the sense which it makes it easier to digest as the audience, to understand why these two people might have done what they've done in the form of a larger, simple goal as the big score. And the quote I've chosen is when Perry's really wants to get out, but Dick is not having it. And he says, "Here, I've set up this big score. Here we've come all this way, and now this punk wants to chicken out," he said. "Maybe you think I ain't got the guts to do it alone, but by God, I'll show you who got guts." And this obviously ties back to this point of verisimilitude, where despite Perry pulling the trigger, Dick is the true killer, because he creates this grand score despite it not existing. It just makes the narrative easier to digest for the audience. And that's my verisimilitude board. Thank you for watching.